Hi, this is Justin Rutledge, and I'll be presenting the interactive visualization for the final project for data visualization at UTC in the Computer Science Department in the spring of 2025. So this visualization intends to show the correlation between three main variables, which is tariff rates, gross import values for specific goods or categories of goods, and the CPI, or the Consumer Price Index. So we'll start with the Consumer Price Index. I have just a basic line over here, a vertical line at the left side of this chart, indicating the Consumer Price Index. Here in 2003, that Consumer Price Index is 184, and we can move this, move the year with the slider bar at the bottom to 2004, and we see that the CPI in 2004 was 188.9, a little bit of a change there. The CPI essentially indicates the cost of living for a US citizen. It's an indicator of how expensive it is to live day-to-day life, and the CPI relative to previous years the increase may indicate inflation. For example, if the CPI one year is 100 and the next year it's 110, that would be a 10% rate of inflation. So it's just a good way to gauge how expensive things are. The main goal of this visualization is to be able to drill down into categories of goods that are imported and look at the relative magnitude of the tariffs that are applied to those goods or categories of goods, and compare that to the CPI for a given year, and be able to identify how things may change over time. So let's drill down into one of these. Let's say apparel, articles, and accessories, knit or crocheted. And as you can see in this visualization, well, I'm going to give some context first. The size of each of these nodes on this tree map indicates the gross import value. So the larger the square, the higher the value that's of the imported goods. So electric machinery, etc., this includes sound equipment, TV equipment, and parts, has over $1 trillion worth of imports, $1.3 trillion of imports. And this little highlighted tooltip is a really easy way to indicate this, even though we can see in the title here for electric machinery. For some of these smaller squares, nothing is displayed there because it's too small, but you can hover over it and you can see, say, musical instruments, parts and accessories thereof, have a gross import value of just over 2 billion, which is nowhere near 1.3 trillion. So let's go ahead and click on this, because we can click on any of these and drill down a little bit further and generate a subtree map. So let's look at musical instruments. Even though that was such a small square, we see there is quite a variety of different musical instruments that are imported and categorized using the HTS. And more context here, the HTS is the Harmonized Tariff Schedule. It breaks down any imported goods into a series of categories and finally products based on a numeric string. So 9.2 indicates what they call the chapter in the HTS. So here it's a broad category, and then further digits indicate further specifications. So 920590 indicates woodwind instruments or wind music instruments in general. 920120 indicates grand pianos, and that category itself only contains one kind of product, which is grand pianos. And now let's see how these tariffs and the values of the imports overall change over time. We can do that by sliding this slider bar, as mentioned a moment ago. Oops, there we go. And we can see the relative value of the imports across instruments does change over time quite a bit, but the magnitude of the tariffs here really don't. It looks like string musical instruments, like electric or other than with electric sound or amplified guitars, carry one of the higher tariffs here, which is an 8.7% rate. It's worth noting the magnitude percentage measured here is a normalized magnitude of both the ad valorem and the specific rates. An ad valorem rate is going to be a percentage of the value of whatever's imported. A specific rate is going to be per quantity. So this could be, say, per pair of shoes, per head of livestock, per kilogram of grain, something like that. But here for this kind of musical instrument, if it's valued over $100, it's just charged at a flat, or it's not a flat rate, it's charged at an 8.7% rate. The magnitude, again, this is only relative to tariffs across the board. It's a normalized rate incorporating both ad valorem and specific rates. It was used primarily so that colors could pop out relative to, for some products relative to others based on their tariffs. So here, for example, lubricating oils with or without additives, given this specific description, carries a higher tariff relative to the other in magnitude. Here it's 84 cents per whatever measure it is, probably a kilogram given that it's a quantity, or maybe liter given that it's a liquid quantity. And so overall that's measured using normalized schemes a higher magnitude than the 8.6% rate. Of particular note, we can go back to 2003 and we can look at, say, tobacco products. Here we have a specific kind of tobacco product that is the top of the magnitude scale based on the normalization scheme, and it's basically any tobacco of this kind that's imported is charged $5.4 per kilogram of tobacco that's imported. This is well over twice the value of the product itself, and so even though it's not charged based on a percentage rate, it still has one of the highest magnitude, really the highest magnitude of tariffs, and you can clearly see why. Well, we can stay on the tobacco bit for a little bit. Let's just see how this changes over time, right? So we move this, we see the CPI is going up in the mid to late 2000s, and we see that the imports of tobacco, partly or wholly stemmed, seems to be diminishing over time compared to others. And in the late 2010s and the early 2020s, we see really an increase of a variety of tobacco substitute products. This probably corresponds to the rise of vaporizers or vapes being used instead of regular cigarettes, cigars, or other real tobacco products. Anyways, there's a lot of information that can be gleaned from this visualization, just having an interactive tree map like this. And it was a fun project to kind of represent and explore what categories and products are taxed upon import, and what the major imports are that come into the United States. There's all kinds of use cases for this, and just based on this project alone, there doesn't seem to be much correlation between tariffs and CPI or gross imports and tariffs. They seem to be independent variables, but from this visualization alone, it's hard to tell. It's useful for looking at the changes on a smaller scale over time or relative differences between categories over time. Either way, there's a lot to be gained here. I'll include this HTML file. It is quite large. If I can include it on Canvas, I will. If not, I may just send the code, and that can be run if you have the data available in the CSV files. I can send those too. Thank you for listening. Have a great day.